Welcome back, it's me, Lou. Today we are going to travel in the time machine and travel way back to the early 2000s as we take a look at this. This is a much older Mattel Bane action figure. Okay, so I didn't do my homework completely on this figure. All I remember that of course, it's Bane, but I don't know if this belongs to the DC Classics line, the DC Universe line, or the DC Comics line, or the Batman line that started way back, I think, in 2003. This is an action figure that I've been wanting for like ever, but I just keep on forgetting to get around to it. I found this recently on a seller's store on eBay. I got this for a really reasonable price. I think maybe like, I want to say $20, give or take, $1 or $2. I got this figure loose. It was in really great shape, as you can see. And even though it's a much more antiquated action figure design, it's still a very impressive looking action figure. The articulation scheme is very dated, as you can see. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of like a modern figure. Size-wise, this guy's pretty decent. Now, if you wanted to get this guy standing straight up, it's kind of weird because you have to kind of bend his legs, and he's kind of in a hunched down pose. If he stretches legs out, his legs just kind of get splayed outward like this. So if you want him to stand up, it's weird. You have to put him like in a much more hunched back squatting mode. And size-wise, this guy stands in at about depending on how you stretch his legs out, 6.5 to 6 3/4. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's kind of a beefier figure for its size. Here he is next to the McFarlane designed Batman. So as you can see, it's not that small of an action figure. It's pretty sizable though when you compare it to other figures that were produced by Mattel, especially in the DC Classics line throughout the early to like mid 2000s. The detail on this figure, I think, is still kind of holds up today. Let's take a closer look at him. The mask is really well done. It's kind of like a weird mix between the luchador mask and a gimp mask. It kind of has that leather appearance with the zipper on top, but it kind of retains the luchador-like designings around the face. This Bane has the red lenses. He has kind of like a transparent green venom tube that connects from the back of his head. As you can see, all the different hoses down to his forearm, much like the original comic book design. He has fingerless gloves, with some detailing, nice stitching along the gloves. An extremely vascular figure, as you can see with the musculature and the veins. Really well done. And to further accent the muscles, there's a ink wash applied in the crevices. So if you look in the crevices of his muscles, you can see like a slight ink wash applied to really bring out the detail. It's almost like the equivalent of panel lining like a Gundam model. He even has a wash slightly applied to kind of give him the appearance of like he has hairy arms and shoulders. So he kind of has like the appearance of like wearing almost like a wrestling singlet. And this is actually a separate piece from the body, as you can see right there, which is kind of like a nice touch. And even though this figure is probably close to being like 20 years old, the nice thing is that even though this is made of that softer rubbery plastic, it has not started to degrade or get sticky. So I'm very fortunate there. Many times with a lot of action figures produced in the early 2000s, sometimes this rubbery plastic material kind of like deteriorates and breaks down, and it eventually becomes really tacky and sticky, but that's not the case with this. So I'm very fortunate with that. The sculpting is nice. A nice shade of black also. This shade of black is pretty photogenic. If you're into action figure photography, this figure, it loves to be photographed. You know, it looks impressive under the light, the lighting, under the right lighting conditions, as you can see right here. Great flesh tone. Love the use of silver, especially on the belt and on the mask. Again, very excellent choice of colors with the black. Has a nice sheen to it. It's almost kind of like a nice satin as opposed to it being glossy. Excellent detail on the boots. Really clean sculpted laces and stitching. In terms of this guy's articulation, his head rotates. His arms rotate. They go outward. Single pinned elbow, elbow bend. Wrists are articulated. Swivel at the waist. His legs kick up. Articulated single pinned knees, and ankle articulation. And there's also a boot cut, so you have boot swivel. So, you know, this figure doesn't really hold up in terms of articulation with a modern action figure. You know, with most modern action figures, you might get the butterfly joint, you might get the double pinned elbows, and more wrist articulation besides just the swivel. But for this figure, you know, when it's produced, you know, this was kind of like the standard for what was considered like an almost premium action figure. This was very much in line with, like, you know, the old Toy Biz Marvel Legends and the older DC figures. And it's really nice. I want to see, I think, I think it was the Four Horsemen art studio might have been responsible for this guy. The Four Horsemen did a lot of Mattel's action figures, especially with the Masters of the Universe 2000 X line and Mattel's first DC superhero line in the early 2000s, which was Batman, which I think this guy might belong to. So, excellent figure. It kind of really retains that much more traditional, classic Bane look. So I do have another Bane action figure that we can at least compare it to, and this is a much more recent one. This is the McFarlane Build-A-Figure Bane from the Last Night on Earth wave, which came out, I think, maybe about 2 years ago, or at least close to 2 years ago. As you can see, gigantic figure. It really dwarfs this one here. And then here's the McFarlane designed Batman to give you an idea of the size. So, you know, don't be fooled. Even though this guy looks really small next to these other figures, it's actually a sizable figure if you were to compare it to like maybe like a Marvel Legends or a DC Classics. It's a really cool figure. So yeah, you know, different Banes, different companies. You know, I'm really glad to add this to my collection. This is something I've been wanting for such a long time, but just never got around to it. Back in the day, I used to have a pretty small collection of some of the Mattel first run Batman action figures, but for whatever reason, I never got around to getting Bane. And I think eventually Mattel did make a Build-A-Figure Bane for their DC Classics Universe line, but I think that one's kind of expensive on the secondary market, much like most Mattel Build-A-Figures from back in the day. Nonetheless, cool figure, you know, despite its age. I think it's awesome. So on a scale of 1 to 10, visually, I think this guy's perfect. He looks like old school Bane. He's sizable. He's not too gigantic. He's very muscular with a lot of vascularity in his arms, which I think looks really cool. I love the green Venom tube. So visually, I think he's perfect, you know, perfect 10. But overall, I think, you know, due to the figure's age, the articulation scheme doesn't really hold up. And, you know, he's kind of like, even though he's articulated, you can really keep him in this, like, very one, he's almost like monoposed just because of the way his legs are kind of positioned. So I think overall, this guy would have to be at the lowest a 7 to maybe like as highest 7.5. If you could find this guy loose on the secondary market, or if you find him like at a flea market or at a toy convention, and if he's under 20 bucks, I'd say go for it. And if you could find a mint on card for 20 bucks, that'd be, you know, totally pull the trigger. It's a great piece. If you came up during this time period, I hope this kind of brought back, you know, some fond memories of this, you know, action figure. You know, just because something's old, you know, I don't think it necessarily means it loses its value. I mean, it might lose value monetarily, but I think, you know, from a toy collector's point of view and from like a fan of just Batman stuff, I think this figure still holds up really well. All right, with that being said, let's wrap this one up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So, until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I will see you at the next one. All right, later.